What if the Odyssey is not only a tale of monsters, storms, and a clever king trying to reach home? What if, beneath its mythic surface, it preserves distorted memories of a world that once connected entire seas? Long before the Classical Age, Bronze Age sailors moved through a vast maritime network. Ships crossed the Aegean, linking the palaces of mainland Greece with the shores of Anatolia. From there, routes extended towards Cyprus, rich in copper, along the Levantine coast, where merchants exchanged timber, glass, metals, and luxury goods, south to Egypt, and westward toward the islands and coasts of Italy. These were not isolated cultures, separated by empty water. They were bound together by trade, royal gifts, marriage alliances, hostages, diplomats, craftsmen, refugees, and travelers. Ports became meeting places. Harbors carried languages, technologies, religious ideas, and stories. A kingdom could depend on a distant supply of metal, grain, or timber, and a disruption in one region could send consequences rippling across the entire system. In that world, a voyage like Odysseus's would not have been an impossible detour through unknown waters. It would have unfolded along routes already used by merchants, envoys, raiders, and migrants. The strange peoples he encounters may preserve blurred impressions of foreign courts and coastal communities. His long struggle to return may echo not just personal adventure, but the dangers of moving through a fractured world. Because the poems were shaped and reshaped for centuries, memory became legend. Real places shifted. Historical upheavals became divine punishments. The collapse of palaces and trade routes was recast as the aftermath of war. So the Odyssey may be read as a cultural echo, a story born from the memory of a Bronze Age sea and from the catastrophe that broke it apart. Before the destruction layers, abandoned palaces, and stories of wandering survivors, the Eastern Mediterranean was held together by movement. Ships carried copper, tin, timber, grain, wine, oil, ivory, glass, textiles, weapons, and luxury goods between courts that understood one another through trade and diplomacy. This was not a single empire. It was a network of kingdoms, ports, merchants, sailors, craftsmen, interpreters, and officials. Palace administrations recorded goods on clay tablets. Rulers exchanged letters, arranged marriages, and addressed powerful foreign kings as brothers. Gifts were rarely just gifts. Gold, horses, fine cloth, and carved objects created obligations, advertised prestige, and kept political relationships alive. This system depended on extraordinary coordination. Copper from Cyprus might be loaded beside tin, whose distant source remains debated. Both could reach a workshop hundreds of miles away and become bronze tools or weapons. Canaanite jars traveled with wine and oil. Baltic amber reached the Mediterranean, while Egyptian scarabs and Eastern glass moved west. Standardized weights allowed strangers to bargain across languages and customs. One shipwreck off the coast of Anatolia captures this world in miniature. The Ulu Barun vessel, sunk in the late Bronze Age, carried tons of copper ingots, tin, glass, ivory, ebony, resin, jewelry, weapons, and personal objects from several cultures. Its cargo suggests not a simple voyage between two ports, but a floating intersection of many regions. Yet connection created vulnerability. A delayed grain shipment could deepen famine. A blocked strait could disrupt metal supplies. Piracy, rebellion, drought, or war in one region could send consequences across the sea. The brilliance of this world lay in its interdependence. So did its danger. Before the ships burned, the sea was not the boundary between civilizations. It was the road that made their world possible. Archaeologists do not ask whether Homer gives us a perfect photograph of the past. They ask a more careful question: which details might preserve memories of different historical moments?
Weapons offer one clue. The poem describes bronze armor, shields, helmets, and fighting styles that do not all belong neatly to the 8th century BCE when the stories were written down. Some resemble late Bronze Age equipment. Others reflect later Greek traditions. Together, they suggest layers of memory, not a single battlefield frozen in time. The same pattern appears in feasting. Homeric banquets feature roasted meat, precious metal vessels, formal seating, and gift exchange. Archaeologists can compare these scenes with palace storerooms, serving equipment, animal bones, and elite drinking practices. The comparison reveals familiar social rituals, while also showing that the poem combines customs from different centuries. Palaces are another useful but dangerous comparison. Descriptions of halls, treasuries, servants, and authority may echo the great administrative centers of the Bronze Age. Yet Homer's palaces are not blueprints. They are literary spaces, reshaped by later audiences who remembered palace society after those institutions had vanished. Burial customs add further clues: cremation, inhumation, grave goods, and monumental tombs appear across the wider tradition. These practices belong to different regions and periods, so their presence together warns us against assigning every scene to one historical setting. Even maritime technology carries echoes. Ships, harbors, navigation, and overseas exchange can be compared with shipwrecks, harbor remains, anchors, and cargoes. But the poem's seafaring world is a composite, part remembered Bronze Age network, part later experience, part imagination. That is the archaeological method, not proving that Odysseus existed, but tracing how real materials, places, and practices survived, recombined, in a story built across generations.
Picture the Aegean not as open water, but as a chain of stepping stones. From ports on the Greek mainland, Mycenaean ships could move through Euboea and the Cyclades toward western Anatolia or south through the Dodecanese to Crete. These routes were shaped by the seasons. Sailors waited for reliable winds, hugged familiar coastlines, and timed departures around calm seas. A journey that looks short on a map could become a week of delays, forced landings, or desperate detours when weather turned. The cargoes were ordinary but strategically important: metals, timber, oil, wine, textiles, pottery, and grain. A ship might leave carrying one kingdom's surplus and arrive needing to bargain for water, repairs, or protection. Ports were not just marketplaces, they were gateways controlled by local rulers, where merchants depended on hospitality, and where rival powers could turn a welcome into a trap. Political alliances made the corridor possible, yet also made it dangerous. A captain might sail safely under the protection of one palace, only to enter waters claimed by an enemy. Raids, tribute demands, piracy, and sudden conflict could interrupt a commercial voyage and scatter its crew across unfamiliar shores. That is how a practical route could become an epic ordeal. The traveler leaves with a known destination, but weather pushes him off course. A closed harbor forces a new alliance. A missing cargo creates a dispute. One delay becomes another, until the voyage is remembered not as trade, but as wandering. Odysseus's episodic journey may preserve that logic. Not a single impossible voyage, but the accumulated hazards of moving through a connected, competitive maritime world. One where every island was a waypoint, a market, or a potential enemy. At the mouth of the Dardanelles stood Troy, a city positioned where two worlds met. To the west lay the Aegean and its island routes. Beyond the straits opened the Sea of Marmara, then the Black Sea, carrying timber, metals, grain, livestock, and other resources southward. Troy's importance was not simply that it was rich or that it commanded an impressive hill. Its power came from location. Ships moving between the Aegean and the Black Sea had to navigate narrow waters, changing currents, and politically sensitive shores.
Whoever influenced this gateway could tax movement, protect merchants, restrict rivals, or turn access into diplomatic leverage. That makes the Trojan War aftermath especially revealing. In the poem, the Trojan destruction becomes the consequence of wounded honor, a stolen woman, and a coalition assembled around prestige. Historically, the pressures may have been less romantic but no less intense. Competition over trade routes, regional alliances, tribute, and the right to participate in a valuable north-south network. A conflict near Troy could have involved local powers, Mycenaean interests, Anatolian kingdoms, or several disputes remembered together. But archaeology cannot confirm Homer's exact sequence of heroes, duels, and divine interventions. The site shows that Troy was repeatedly occupied, rebuilt, and connected to wider exchange systems. It does not prove that Achilles fought Hector, or that one 10-year siege unfolded exactly as the poem describes. What may survive is a historical tension transformed into epic, a struggle over a gateway, retold as a struggle over honor. The poem's emotional language turns geography into destiny. Troy is not merely a city to be conquered, it is the locked door between seas, and the memory of who controlled that door could echo long after its walls fell. Far to the east of the Aegean, one island became essential to the Bronze Age world: Cyprus. Its importance began beneath the ground. Cyprus held rich deposits of copper, the metal that alloyed with tin produced bronze. That bronze became weapons, tools, fittings, and vessels, objects that could decide the strength of a palace and the survival of a crew. But copper did not remain on the island. It moved outward, carried by ships and exchanged through a web linking Cyprus with the Levant, Anatolia, the Aegean, and Egypt. The island was therefore more than a source of raw material. It was a meeting point. Harbors gathered merchants, sailors, officials, and craftsmen from societies that spoke different languages and worshipped different gods. Along with copper came painted pottery, glass, ivory, jewelry, textiles, and unfamiliar designs. Cypriot goods, meanwhile, traveled west, entering settlements where Eastern fashions could be admired, copied, or transformed. This helps explain why the Odyssey's geography feels larger than the Greek world. Its eastern seas are filled with places that seem close enough to reach, yet strange enough to inspire wonder. Wealthy ports, foreign rulers, dangerous coastlines, and peoples whose customs challenge the traveler's assumptions. Such stories may not preserve a single voyage or a literal map. They can preserve the memory of repeated contact, of ships arriving from elsewhere, and of goods whose origins were difficult to imagine. Cyprus gives that imaginative geography a material foundation. Every bronze blade, imported vessel, or exotic ornament hinted at a wider network behind the horizon. In the Odyssey, the unknown is often encountered at sea. In the Bronze Age, the sea was also the route by which the known world kept expanding.
Along the eastern Mediterranean coast, the great ports of the Levant formed a world of constant negotiation. Cities such as Ugarit, Byblos, Sidon, and Ashkelon were not isolated kingdoms. They were multilingual meeting points where merchants, sailors, diplomats, and displaced travelers crossed paths. A trader might arrive from Cyprus carrying copper, speak with agents from Mycenaean Greece, bargain with Anatolian officials, and send goods onward to Egypt. The languages changed from harbor to harbor, but the commercial rules were familiar. Measure the cargo, recognize the seal, honor the guest, and protect the agreement. These ports connected different political worlds without erasing their rivalries. That helps us hear Homer's strangers differently. The unknown visitor who appears at a household door may preserve the memory of a real merchant arriving far from home. Gifts are more than gestures of generosity. They can represent the exchange of prestige goods, favors, and information that made long-distance trade possible. A cup, a fine textile, or a weapon might announce who you were, where you came from, and what relationship you hope to establish. Even the shipwreck survivor fits this setting. A sailor washed onto an unfamiliar shore was not simply an individual in distress. He could be a valuable specialist, a witness to distant events, or a dangerous unknown whose identity had to be tested. Hospitality was therefore essential, but never automatic. It depended on recognition, introductions, shared customs, and the hope that kindness would be returned. Homer's contested identities may reflect this fragile reality. In a connected world, people carried names, accents, cargoes, and stories across political borders. A stranger could become a partner or a threat within a single conversation. Beneath the poem's drama lies the social tension of maritime commerce, a network held together by trust and always vulnerable to storms, violence, and betrayal.
Beyond the Levant lay Egypt, not a distant footnote, but one of the great economic engines of the Bronze Age. The Nile Valley produced grain on a scale few kingdoms could match. In years of shortage, Egyptian wheat could mean survival for foreign courts. Ships also carried luxury goods northward: gold, faience, linen, carved vessels, ebony, ivory, and finely worked objects that advertised access to the world's richest river kingdom. This traffic was not simple trade, it moved through diplomacy. Rulers exchanged gifts, messengers, marriage negotiations, and letters, measuring status as carefully as value. Egyptian officials kept records of contacts with lands across the sea. Their inscriptions and painted scenes refer to Aegean peoples, often identified as the Keftiu, and depict foreigners bringing tribute or gifts from the islands and the mainland. These images do not give us a complete map of Mycenaean voyaging, but they confirm something important. Aegean sailors, merchants, and envoys were visible in Egyptian political memory. The southern horizon was not imaginary, it was a real destination, reached through routes linking Crete, Cyprus, the Levant, and the Nile. And in Greek memory, Egypt became more than a trading partner. It was the far edge of experience, ancient, wealthy, strange, and full of secrets. Epic stories send heroes there when the world must widen beyond familiar shores. Menelaus reaches Egypt after the Trojan War. Helen is connected with Egyptian settings. Prophetic knowledge and danger seem to gather beside the Nile. Those episodes are shaped by myth, not preserved as travel reports. Yet myth often works with inherited fragments. A remembered voyage, a foreign court, a cargo of grain or luxury goods, and stories of Egyptian wealth could be transformed into scenes of wonder. Egypt, then, may stand in the Odyssey as both historical horizon and legendary one, a place where genuine Bronze Age contact survived, magnified inside the language of epic.
If the Bronze Age network stretched east towards Cyprus, Egypt, and the Levant, it also reached in the opposite direction, westward, into waters that became increasingly unfamiliar. From the Aegean, routes could pass through the Ionian Sea towards Sicily and southern Italy. These lands were not empty margins. They held coastal communities, metal resources, fertile plains, and access to routes leading farther west. Sardinia, too, stood within a wider central Mediterranean system, linked by sailors who carried copper, tin, weapons, pottery, and stories. Archaeology reveals contacts between the Aegean and these western regions, sometimes through objects, sometimes through shared techniques, and sometimes through technologies that seem to arrive from somewhere else. A ship entering a strange harbor might encounter unfamiliar fortifications, different styles of metalwork, or volcanic terrain unlike anything seen at home. That is where the Odyssey's geography begins to feel significant. Its monsters may preserve more than supernatural invention. A one-eyed giant could transform an encounter with an isolated herding community into a terrifying story. A land of fire and smoke might grow from memories of volcanic islands, especially around Sicily and the central Mediterranean. Strange peoples, dangerous shores, and islands where ordinary rules seemed suspended could all begin as reports from distant voyages. Oral tradition does not preserve a map unchanged. It compresses distances, combines places, and turns unfamiliar technologies into marvels. A foreign vessel,
A new kind of weapon or an unusual method of working metal could become evidence of a people favored or cursed by the gods. As trade routes expanded, information traveled with the goods. Sailors returned with warnings, names, and stories, retold until real coastlines became mythic landscapes. The Western route did not merely carry Bronze Age people toward Italy, it carried the raw material from which the Odyssey's strangest worlds could be imagined. Around 1200 BCE, the Bronze Age network did not simply fade away, it fractured under pressure from several crises arriving at once. Palace centers were destroyed across the Aegean and Anatolia. Some fell to fire, others were abandoned, their administrative systems, the scribes, storehouses, and officials who coordinated the economy simply disappearing. When palaces failed, trade routes failed with them. Copper, tin, grain, oil, and luxury goods no longer moved reliably between ports and courts. Then came movement. Groups displaced by famine, conflict, or the collapse of their own rulers crossed the sea and entered new territories. Egyptian records describe attacks by the Sea Peoples, presenting them as a vast enemy arriving with families, ships, and weapons. But the reality may have been less like one invasion and more like a chain reaction. Refugees becoming raiders, raiders joining armies, and local populations pushed into motion by every new defeat. Warfare intensified, fortifications were strengthened, coastal settlements burned. Kingdoms that had once exchanged gifts and diplomatic letters now struggled to defend their borders or to feed their people. Political authority fragmented into smaller, competing powers, while old dynasties vanished from the record. Generations later, these upheavals could survive as compressed story. Ruined cities became memories of mighty kingdoms brought down. Migrating peoples became raiding fleets. Displaced rulers became exiles searching for a lost throne, and the long aftermath of a broken world became the journey of heroes struggling year after year to return home. The Odyssey may preserve not one disaster, but the echo of an entire age coming apart. But how could memories of that older maritime world survive after its palaces, writing systems, and political order had vanished? The answer may lie in oral performance. For generations, poets carried stories from one audience to another, preserving durable details, a dangerous strait, an island rich in metals, a harbor where foreign merchants exchanged gifts, or a people known for horses, raiding, or seafaring. These details did not need to remain perfectly accurate to remain recognizable. A coastline could shift in memory, while the idea of a gateway between worlds endured. At the same time, every performance belonged to its own age. Iron Age audiences understood the sea through their own ships, rival communities, rituals, and fears. Poets therefore fitted ancient fragments into newer narrative patterns. A chain of trading ports became a voyage through strange kingdoms. Different coastal peoples became the Cyclopes, the Laestrygonians, or the Phaeacians. A powerful island society could be remembered as the realm of an enchantress, while unfamiliar customs became tests of hospitality and identity. Repeated performance encouraged this transformation. Formulaic language helped poets remember long passages, but variation allowed them to reshape old material for new listeners. Storms could represent the danger of crossing political boundaries. Monsters could embody distant communities, viewed as human, yet radically different. Divine intervention could explain sudden changes in wind, fortune, or allegiance. Over time, practical knowledge became symbolic drama. The root itself disappeared beneath episodes of temptation, shipwreck, disguise, and recognition. Yet the underlying memory may still remain, a connected sea, populated by ports and peoples whose names and identities had been blurred by centuries of retelling. The Odyssey was not a map preserved unchanged. It was a living archive, one that turned geography into myth and historical contact into a test of whether a stranger could still find the way home.
The Odyssey, then, is not a time capsule from one precise year. It is something more human and more revealing. Layered cultural memory. Across generations, singers gathered fragments from a connected Bronze Age world. The routes followed by merchants, sailors, diplomats, raiders, and migrants. They remembered islands as stepping stones, straits as gateways, and distant shores as places linked by exchange. But as centuries passed, the political system that created those connections disappeared. Palaces burned, kingdoms vanished, languages changed. What survived was not a map, but a narrative, a world transformed by distance, danger, and wonder. That is why the poem can feel both strangely familiar and historically displaced. Its monsters may occupy the spaces once filled by unknown coasts. Its exotic peoples may preserve impressions of foreign societies encountered through trade. Its treasures, metals, ships, and feasts echo the material culture of an age when the Mediterranean was already an interconnected arena. And its fragmented geography may reflect not one voyage, but many journeys compressed into a single heroic memory. The Odyssey does not tell us exactly what happened before the collapse. It tells us what later communities continued to imagine about a world they could no longer fully see. In that sense, myth is not the opposite of history. It is history carried forward through emotion, performance, and story. So when Odysseus finally sails home, his journey is more than the return of one man to Ithaca. It is also the afterimage of a vanished network, trade routes crossing the sea, kingdoms that once watched over them, and Mediterranean societies bound together before the system broke apart. His homecoming closes a personal voyage, but it also preserves the memory of the connected world through which that voyage became possible.